Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Friday morning, December 17th. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open. I just got that open, and I'm going to pop the link in there to what I want to look at here this morning. And we're going to continue on with mentalhelp.net. And there's so many really good articles on this website regarding abuse, domestic violence, and whatnot, and the effects of abuse, and links and all kinds of material here. I hope everybody will go check this out. That's www.mentalhelp.net. And I'm going to pop the link into the chat room. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. I'm not a professional counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own shows on Blog Talk Radio here. And I just wanted to be one more voice. I started out over a year ago, just over a year ago. And wasn't sure how long I'd be doing these shows. So I really appreciate everybody who's tuning in to all my shows. I really appreciate it. I got like almost 17,000 shows listened to, and so somebody's listening, and I don't know who all of you are, but I thank you very much for tuning in. I'm not a counselor or therapist. You have to listen at your own discretion. I'm just a private citizen, a survivor of abuse and a survivor of child abuse and secondhand domestic violence. And just wanted to be another voice for survivors out here. There's so many of us, and it's absolutely horrible when you think about how many of us there are. It'd be good if it was just a couple of us, because that means that nobody would have been abused, but a couple people, and that would have been great. But unfortunately, sadly, there's so many of us, and that's why it just pushes me to do this, because I know there's so many people out there who have been abused and who, if they happen to come across my show, they'll hopefully get some validation and realize that it wasn't their fault and get some help. You know what I mean? It's horrible, absolutely horrible. But I'm glad to be able to do these shows, and I'll just keep doing them as long as I can. And it's great for me because it's really a huge part of my healing journey, because all the material that I'm looking at is very helpful for me. That's why I'm passing it on to other people. But you have to listen at your own discretion, because the topics of abuse are very sensitive. And you may, if this material might trigger someone who is a survivor, and survivors need to be very careful, what they're listening to. It depends on what stage you're in your healing journey. If you're just starting out in your healing journey, you want to be very cautious what you're doing when you're listening to anything like this or reading material, right? Sometimes it's better for survivors to have someone with them when they're going to do something like this, to listen to somebody, another survivor talking about the abuse, or when they're reading anything like about abuse and stuff. If you have to listen at your own discretion and know what's comfortable for you to listen to. And if this material would bother you, then you have to turn it off. And I talk about everything to do with abuse. So you want to be very careful listening to my shows, and I just ask everyone, that listen at your own discretion. And if it bothers you, you have to turn it off. It is your responsibility. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows from adults or someone in your life who cares about what you're doing. I hope you have somebody who cares what you're doing online, because you need to keep yourself safe online. There's really so many sick individuals out there who are online, child sexual predators, pedophiles and whatnot, who are trying to get a hold of children. They will do anything they can to get a hold of children. They'll say anything. They'll pretend that they're young people too, and they'll get you to give them your information, your name and your address or your telephone numbers, what school you go to, things like this. And they'll try to get you to tell them all about you, and then they'll manipulate you, and then you'll think they're your age, and then you'll go meet them, and it turns out to be a child sexual predator who's like 38, 50 years old, and they sexually assault children. And you do not want to be a victim of a child sexual predator. So make sure that if you're under the age of 18 and under, you make sure that you have someone listen to the show with you, a parent or caregiver, somebody who's older who can help you make a decision if whether you should be listening or not, right? Because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and there's a chat room present here. And anytime, there's a chat room present, you need to be very careful what you're doing. And get the information. Just type into your browser, online safety for children, internet safety, things like this. And it will bring you to all kinds of great websites out there that, talk about how to keep yourself safe when you're online, right? So important. And, parents, if you're listening to this, make sure you do educate yourself and your kids on internet safety, because it's a huge issue. And if it wasn't, then FBI and ICAC wouldn't be working 24 hours a day to try to stop these sick individuals. But sadly enough, there's a whole lot of sick individuals online. So you really need to, as a parent, It is your responsibility to get that information and pass it on to your kids if you have children, right? So I want to look at this article from mentalhealth.net, www.mentalhealth.net. It's from Alan Schwartz, PhD. Dr. Schwartz's web blog is what it's called. He's got a homepage and everything. You can contact him. He's got an RSS feed, and he's got full archive of all of his work and what he talks about and what he's working on. And this particular article is called "The Deleterious Effects of Child Abuse." And I didn't look up the word deleterious, but I don't even really know what it means. But as we read through the article, we'll be able to see what he's saying. The deleterious effects of child abuse. Dissociative disorders is kind of where it falls under that category on this website, right, for mentalhealth.net. So Alan Schwartz, PhD, is writing about the deleterious effects of child abuse, and he posted this April 6, 2006, right? But he's an LCSW, and he's got a PhD, so he goes on to talk about the effects of child abuse, deleterious effects of child abuse. So I want to read right through here, and we're just going to talk about it and look at it, and that's what we're going to do this morning. So I'm reading right from the page. You can go there if you're in the chat room and you grab that link. That's where it'll take you to, and you can check it out yourself there. For those, I'm going to read right here, just right from the page. For those who mistakenly believe that the damaging effects of child abuse are outgrown by childhood, this information may come as a painful surprise. The fact is that the effects of child abuse last into adulthood and throughout one's life. Excuse me. Its effects are often deleterious. Oh, here we go. Meaning that the impact is often delayed and slow to develop, but acute when they do occur. Okay. So that's what it means, that if its effects are often deleterious, meaning that the impact is often delayed and slow to develop, but acute when they do occur. The consequence is that many adults who were abused during childhood experience its worst effects long after they have entered adulthood. I've heard that, just not only just talking to survivors, you know what I mean, but reading a lot of material, because I do a whole lot of research. And I've seen that on other websites where other psychiatrists and people who work with survivors and people who work, to stop and prevent child abuse. There's so many articles that I've seen out there that were saying the same things, really. They were saying that many times people who were abused as children, the effects actually kind of start really being noticeable when a person hits around 30 years old. And to be honest with you, that's exactly what happened to me. I mean, I talk about this on my own stuff all the time, but I was managing to live pretty much in denial until I hit the age of 31 after my mom passed away. And after my mom passed away, I realized, at that point, I was sad that she had passed away. I was definitely sad, but I was also relieved because she was very toxic, and I had just moved away from the family like the year before she passed away, a year and a month or two. It was almost to the date, actually, really, when I left. So it was about a year. And so I was away from her for a year, and my dad, right, which was great because I needed a break from them, and they had been completely toxic my whole life. But it still, a sense of sadness came about when she passed away because that was my mother, right? And I knew how she had suffered her whole entire life. So I'm a human being, and I know when people are suffering, and I did feel bad for her in that respect, But it was also a bit of a relief because I thought, oh, thank God I'll never have to hear another horrible word come out of her mouth, And by the time I hit, like the age of 18, all the physical abuse had stopped, right? But the 17 was the last time my mom actually physically abused me. But the thing is, and that's old, but people would think, my God, you know what I mean? But yeah, this is true. And she was a vicious woman. So, but, as I grew older, a little bit older, 19, 20, 21, she was mainly just very verbally abusive still, and psychologically and emotionally abusive, so that's the whole issue. She just couldn't physically abuse me anymore because, she was getting old herself and she was very sick, and but she was very toxic, and she was toxic all the way up until she died, right? And so I was kind of, relieved when she passed away, really, but sad too. And so I, moved back up to Canada, and after I moved back up after her funeral, I was living up here, but I was living in BC for a little while, and then I moved back up to Calgary and after the funeral and settled into Calgary where I'm at right now. And the thing is that first year after she passed away, I was 31 and had been away from them for a year. Had been experiencing some issues with nightmares about the abuse that I had suffered under their hands, especially at her hands. had told my partner about it because I'd woke up in the middle of the night. This was before she passed away, the year that I was just moved up here, and told him about what had happened. That I was abused as a child, and I had a nightmare, and it was affecting my life for sure. But it still didn't seem to be too much of a problem. And then after my mom passed away, and I was on my own at the age of 31 up here in Calgary by myself with no family around really, that it hit me, and I was grieving the loss of my mom first of all, and then I started to grieve really for the loss of my childhood and the loss of everything in my life that I had missed out from her. Like I knew that I was never going to get any of that nurturing or care or love or concern from her, and especially now that she was gone and had passed away, it really did bother me. But it's kind of interesting because they say that a lot of people don't really, the abuse that they suffer as children, sometimes it kicks in when they're like 25, 30 years old. That's when the effects will start to take a noticeable form, right? Where people will start to feel like, oh my God, suddenly they develop these symptoms of PTSD, which they probably had all along, and for some reason were able to, it's interesting how the brain works, like they were able to mask it or do something to push it back, and then all of a sudden you hit a certain age and it just kind of, there's nothing you can really do to stop it. It just starts to come out. And I've talked to a lot of survivors, and they all said about the same thing, that it hit them when they were in their late 20s and early 30s. And so I find this very interesting. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen to everybody or that it would. It's not like there's no such thing as just a black and white situation here. There's always these gray areas. And so, but I just think it's interesting because just looking at the research material, looking at what other survivors have told me and what other psychiatrists are saying about it, it is kind of interesting that a lot of times it manifests later in life when people are older, and then they all of a sudden have to deal with this abuse that they suffered as children, and they have to go through and work through it from a certain age. And before that, they seem to be fine, So I think that is not that they were fine. By all appearances, outside appearances seem to be handling things well, and then all of a sudden a breakdown, right? And so there is something weird about it, and it's very interesting, and I will always continue to research it because I find it very interesting myself. But that's what happened to me, and I after my mom passed away, I really had a lot of work to do because my inner child was just so wounded, and I knew that I was cognitive of the abuse that I had suffered my whole life. But before my mom passed away, it was all about pleasing my mom. It was all about trying to gain her love, trying to get what I needed as a child, even as an adult. So I was always trying to help her out. Stuck around with the family till the age of 29, almost 30 years old. Finally decided to move away because her behavior was so toxic I couldn't take it anymore. And she was dying, so she was very, very sick, so she was very ill and didn't have very many years left, right, when I left and moved away. And she was so toxic, I couldn't stand it anymore. I said, this is it, I've had enough. I had enough abuse from this woman, and I have to go. And so I moved away. And, it's harsh what this stuff does to people. It's absolutely harsh because it was all about her needs. And I do a lot of reading into this stuff. Not into this. I do a lot of reading from psychologists and reading materials about this whole issue that so many parents actually create these situations for their children, and it is abuse, where the children take on their burdens. They take on the role of it's that whole codependent thing. Whatever the parent's lacking, that's where they use their children for. So my mom basically had been using me, my whole life, really, in every way. You know what I mean? And I was, she did not, is not out of love or care. She did that to get her own needs met. So I was a punching bag for a while. I was just somebody she could sound off her problems to, like James Krehbiel. He has a great book, James P. Krehbiel, Krehbiel, EDS, LPC, CCBT. He's a psychiatrist, and he has written a book called Troubled Childhood, Triumphant Life, Healing from the Battle Scars of Youth. And I've been reading this book. He sent it to me, and he's hopefully going to be a guest on my show here as soon as we can schedule one. I wanted to read his book first so we can have a great chat about it. I'm actually about halfway through, but he has a lot of awesome stuff to say, and very, very interesting material regarding the whole situation of what parents do, when they create these situations for their children, really out of sheer ignorance, really, they don't even probably realize they're doing it. That the codependency thing, you know what I mean, where they just meet their own needs through the lives of their children, whatever way that is, right? So I mean, for most of my life, I was a punching bag for my mom. Just somebody she could kick around when she was mad and take her frustrations out on, you know what I mean? I was also taking on the role of my dad because she did, not sexually, but in every other way, because she was always fighting with my dad and trying to get my dad to stay away from her. So trying to keep, because they were both very abusive towards each other. So she used me in place of him. So as soon as I got a car and could drive, then I became basically her helper. I did everything for her, like take her to the doctors, because my mom didn't want my dad doing anything for her because she wanted him to stay away from her, right? And so she wouldn't leave him or divorce him, right? But so they coexisted in this house of horrors, right? But the thing is I was actually happy to do it because I was thinking, hey, this is cool. I get to help my mom, and it kind of gave me a sense that maybe I was needed, maybe I was wanted, and I could do this to help my mom. And I actually didn't mind doing it. You know what I mean? Because I'd take her to her doctor's appointments, 2-3 times a week because my mom was sick. I mean, I'm talking very sick, and especially towards the later years. You know what I mean? And so I'd take her to the hospital. I'd take her everywhere to drive her back and forth to work. I actually worked with her for quite a few years, and I mean a lot of years. We existed on a certain level, right? Then when we go home, that's when the name calling would start, and my mom was just like that. That's how she was. So the two of us, we had a different, a very strained relationship, but at work we finally learned how to become professional together and not do these horrible things to each other at work, But I mean, I was still hanging around trying to keep my parents apart. People say, well, I've had certain family members said, well, if you had moved out, they could have got their lives back together, which is just garbage because if I moved out, my dad would have just raped her, right? Because that's the whole issue. I was just there to make sure that he wouldn't rape her. So, all she had to do was get upset in the middle of the night and start yelling, and I'd be there to get him out of her room because he was always trying to force her to have sex, right? She was very sick and very old, and she couldn't handle it, you know what I mean? But my dad was such a, I don't know, he should have just divorced her. One of them should have divorced each other, right? Moved on. But it's pretty sad, and so I was there to keep the peace. I mean, my mom would tell me, if you leave, I'll die because you know what your dad's going to do to me, and put this guilt trip on me, and stuff like this. And also, if you leave, I'll die because you know that your father won't take me to the doctor when I need to go, which he probably wouldn't because he's such an ignorant person, and to get her medications or whatever, right? And also, I don't know, it's kind of sad. I used to think maybe had I left and moved out and not been that role, they might have learned to work through their differences, you know what I mean? But the thing is we'll never really know because, it didn't happen. So, but my mom, laid this guilt trip on me. It's not like I stuck around. I really wanted to move out and do my own thing and get my own life, you know what I mean? But she used me, right? Then when she passed away, I realized that I was just used. I was like, that's just great. I was used and abused my whole life by this woman. It really did bother me at that time, after she passed away, because I realized the extent of the damage that she had done. I realized, the child abuse I had already known about. I mean, she was abusing me until I was like 17 years old. I mean, physically beating on me and slapping me around, spitting in my face, cursing at me. You know what I mean? Calling me every horrible name in the book. And just making me feel like a dirtbag, right? My whole life. I was used to that, By the time I got, older, I mean, I was used to the idea that I had been treated this way by my mother. But when she passed away, the whole idea that I had been used by her and given up a huge portion of my adult life to try to gain something from her that I missed as a child, it really bothered me. Like it had a huge psychological effect on me. You know what I mean? I think it does on survivors. And I could see all of a sudden this role that I played, which was put on me. I never, she put that role on me, and you know what I mean. Psychologically, had I had a psychiatrist when I was younger, they would have told me exactly what my mom was doing, and I would have been able to get away from it and work through it. But because I never reached out and got any help, and our whole family was like that. We just all suffered on in our own psychoses, you know what I mean, and craziness and codependency, which the rest of my family's still doing, which I refuse to be a part of anymore. And until they can come to me and tell me, hey, we know about the book, we know what you're doing, we support you on your healing journey. We don't maybe agree with what you did about writing your book about the family, but we support you, and we're not going to be in denial about it with you. We're going to agree that there was issues, there was problems, and but if they don't do that, then I'm not talking to them, right? Because I'm so sick and tired of living in their dysfunction, right? That role, I'm not playing that role anymore. So the thing is this had a huge effect on me, and it actually didn't really manifest until after my mom died, because that's when the whole idea that my mom had used me and abused me my whole life, had taken complete advantage of me and ruined my whole young adult life, all because she was mentally ill and abusive and had her own issues, and it was not my fault. You know what I mean? So it was very hard to deal with that, and so many people end up in this situation. And I would say whatever you have to do, you get some help. You know what I mean? You reach out and get some help. So Alan Schwartz goes on to talk about, Alan N. Schwartz says, males and females of all ages, ethnic groups, and races come to the therapist's office seeking help for depression, anxiety, and marital problems. In many of these cases, the spouse or significant other has accused the patient of being abusive to their children or to themselves. Even when there is no present issue of child abuse, the patients who come for treatment are wearing the scars of having been abused during their childhoods, he talks about. He says, what are the symptoms of child abuse in adulthood? He says, an interesting observation about adult survivors of child abuse is the fact that many see no connection between their present life problems and the abuse they suffered as children. In fact, some people deny that the extreme punishment they suffered was abusive. Finally, many of them are convinced that they deserved what their parents did to them. So many times people do. They think that the abuse that they suffered was not abuse, it was just discipline, and that they deserved it. And it depends on what the discipline was. If someone, raped their child, and their child thought, oh, I deserve that, well, there's something wrong there, because child sexual abuse is against the law, and it's abuse, it's wrong, it's punishable by law. So a survivor who may have been sexually abused or assaulted or raped by their parent or by a sibling or something, and thinks that it was okay and that they deserved it, they must have done something wrong. Well, that's psychological damage, because there is something completely wrong with that, and it is never the victim's fault. It's never the child's fault, right? That's the adult choosing to do that. So, and if you were, beaten severely, that is abuse. I will tell you right now. If it hurts and harms a child, it's abuse in any way, any action or inaction that hurts and harms a child, or hurts or harms a child, or has the intent to hurt or harm a child. So even violent threats are against the law. And so many people just think that's just life, and they deserved what they got. Well, I beg to differ, because I know the laws, and thank God. And, there's lots of people that like to think that it's okay to treat children like this. And so, children grow up thinking, oh, yeah, I just deserved what I got, right? Which is so incredibly wrong, because it's just not true. That's actually really false, and child abuse is against the law, thank God. So he goes on to say here that in their adulthood, the symptoms experienced by these patients are similar to those of other people. So, other people, people can have low self-esteem, and they may not have been abused as children, right? Even depression, clinical depression, low-level depression, chronic depression, things like this, doesn't necessarily mean you were abused as a child just because you have low self-esteem and some depression and things like this. But the fact is that people who have been abused will sometimes suffer from these things. It doesn't mean they always will. But some people, some survivors actually will suffer from low self-esteem, chronic low-level depression, generalized anxiety caused by no particular event in the present, panic attacks usually associated with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, social isolation due to a lack of friendships, conflicted and difficult marriages. He goes on to mention dissociative disorders in which the survivor of child abuse goes into a fugue, I don't even know what that is, F-U-G-U-E, state in which they are unaware of what they are doing or where they have been. So it's a defense against stress, which, when it happens, brings the person back to the original childhood trauma. So this is quite interesting. I don't know myself. I'm not dissociative, so I don't have the dissociative disorders, right? So I don't know what it would be like to be someone who has that issue going on in their life. I can't imagine how hard that would be, you know what I mean? To all of a sudden be, be in a state of mind just sitting around somewhere, even at work, and all of a sudden disassociate and just, basically you're just not there, right? You're just off somewhere else, and usually there's sometimes multiple personalities within that. So then another personality takes over while the other one goes away, while the main one goes away. So I don't have that, so I don't know what that would be like. It must be absolutely horrible. And but I guess people can learn to live with it, learn to deal with it. I've talked to lots and lots of people who do have that disorder, dissociative disorder, and sometimes, sometimes, one relationship I actually had to cut off because the person wanted me to treat them badly, and I wouldn't. This person actually told me that I was too nice to them and I was treating them too nicely, and that it made them uncomfortable. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I'm only going to ever treat people with respect and dignity. So I can't be mean to you, so, therefore we cannot be friends. Right? Because I'm not going to abuse somebody just because they were abused and they want me to abuse them, you know what I mean? Because their other split personality is going to come into the picture. This actually is a true story. Everything I say is the truth, actually. This is, sad. I mean, I had to end a friendship because of that. And, I just pray for her. You know what I mean? I'm not going to ever give away names or tell you who it was. I pray for this person and just wish them the best and wish them well. And, I just hope they will get some help and just keep reaching out and getting some help, right? Because this is the whole issue. People that have been abused and suffered from horrific child abuse and in any form, any way, any type of child abuse, I don't care what it is, it's all extremely damaging. And it's all incredibly wrong. And, we are the ones who have to pick up the pieces and move on and try to get our lives back, the lives that we should have had in the first place, which was a decent life full of respect and dignity and self-worth. And we need to learn to love ourselves in order to love anybody else, that's for sure. We need to learn that it wasn't our fault and that why should we carry the guilt and the burdens or the shame surrounding it? That's what I'm so glad to be free from that. I'm free from the shame, free from the burdens of it, because by going public, it allowed me to break the chains of silence, which was that whole shame, rage connection thing that was surrounding my whole life, just knowing what had happened to me and my family and my brothers mainly because they killed themselves, It just bothered me. The two of my brothers are dead, and no one would really know the truth behind their story. Nobody would ever, unless I came forward. If I would have not come forward with my story, then my two brothers that went to their graves, no one would have known what happened to them, and they would have just thought they were just losers. And anybody that would look back on their life history would say, "Oh, they were just losers. They were drug addicts. They were, they were into illegal activities. Had done prison time. One of them anyway, and they were just these bad guys, right?" Nobody would have taken a look to see what happened to them as children and what caused them to go that way. My brothers were just normal little kids, normal little boys who were being abused horrifically by my dad mainly. My mom actually loved her boys. She did not love her girls. That's a fact. My mom hated her girls. She didn't really. The only girl that she had any feelings for at all was my sister Kathy, which my mom told me was the truth. My mom said the only daughter that she had that she truly loved was Kathy. The rest of us, my other sister Irene and myself, she didn't really care about. And so, that's pretty sad when your own mother tells you that, but that's what happens. But my mom loved her boys, right? And my dad was my brother's abuser, right? And he was, so abusive to them. That's why CPS got involved, because my dad was abusing my brother, and my brother told the teacher and the nurse that he was afraid to go home, afraid of my dad. And so the authorities got involved, and my mom was also brought up on charges as well, and they were both told to go get counseling and go get some help, So my brothers, nobody would have known, had I not come forward, to tell what happened to them, you know what I mean? So I'm glad to be able to be a voice for them, because they were not worthless, they were not useless, they were not just a bunch of loser drug addicts like everybody in our family thinks and likes to think, because my family's in denial about the abuse, right? So that's why I came forward, and I'm so glad that I did, because what it did was it allowed me to break the silence and throw away that shame that didn't belong to me in the first place. And it belonged to my abusers, my parents, right, and my brother who sexually molested me. And, that's the whole issue, right? The shame and all that did not belong to me. It belongs to them. And I can walk free now, because I feel like my load has been lifted off of me, because I don't carry that anymore, right? So, not that everybody would want to go public, but I would say whatever you do, if you're a survivor, make sure you get some help. one way or another. You talk to somebody, even if it's just, if you're really struggling and you're thinking, I can't do this, well, just know that you can, because the rest of us are all here saying you can. That's what everybody said to me, and I know it's true because that's what I'm doing. So it's just, we're all like helping each other along. So basically, you got to do the same thing, and you have to want to make that decision to get yourself some help, no matter what it is. If you have to call a crisis line, you do, but you make sure that you do something to, stay here and hopefully get some help and get on the road to your healing journey, right? Because I'm so happy to be on this side of it. 4 years ago, I was ready to kill myself again, So, this just tells you, but it has taken a long time, and it's not something that happens overnight. But I would just say keep reaching out. Keep every day, reach out, because that's what happened to me, and all these hands came back to me to reach out to me, to pull me along. And I tell you, I'm so thankful for those people in my life who did that, and they're all my friends, and thank you so much for doing that, because you are a huge, really the reason for my healing journey. So thank you very much for being here for me, everybody. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. I'll be back on tonight, 9:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. And then I'll be on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio again just before that, 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And be covering the child abuse headlines with Donna Shear for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. So you can check my show page for my shows this weekend and whatnot. So take care, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.